going to talk about the lawyer for these two cases, and that was Edward Blum. He was also the lawyer for Abigail Fisher, and he also is a dude who loves to bring cases like this and try to put them into the Supreme Court. And he was actually involved in the Shelby County v. Holder case. That was the case that made it to the Supreme Court and essentially gutted the Voting Rights Act. That is a portion of why we have voter suppression today. One thing I didn't know, but was in my research and actually what propelled me to go on a probably 5 to 10 snap rant to my friends about how standardized testing is the devil, was that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who we all know is an amazing activist, but also a really good speaker and writer, actually scored poorly on a standardized verbal test when he was younger. And it's not just him. Research has shown that these tests are often biased and underestimate the capabilities of working class individuals, women, and people of color, and do not accurately predict professional or educational success. Also, standardized testing has racist origins. Carl Brigham, the inventor of the original SAT, was a eugenicist, which is essentially somebody who thought that people with blonde hair and blue eyes were the superior race. And if you were white, of course. So you're white, blonde hair, blue eyes. And I think that's also what Hitler believed as well. So right in line with him, what a guy. And wrote that the test would help prove the superiority of the white race and prevent the infiltration of white blood into the Negro. So apparently education is white blood. Didn't know that? Did you know that? I didn't know that. The 1930s expanded the use of these kinds of tests, so reliance on this test consistently excluded communities of color from educational opportunities. The racial disparities in standardized test outcomes still persist today. A Brookings Institute study examined math scores among students who took the SAT in 2015 and found that while the average score was 511 out of 800, on average, white students scored 534, Asian students scored 598, Black students scored 428, and Latinx students scored 457. The study found a similar racial breakdown in ACT scores. A huge reason of why standardized tests are racist is that most of them include differential item functioning, or DIF questions, and these questions might prompt certain answers based on the student. Students could have the same academic background and achievements, but depending on their race, they might answer to the question differently, which is wild. Like, how do you do that in a test? This means that a white student, part of the more dominant culture, would have the assumed right answer because the questions were made by folks who are also part of that dominant culture. Dozens of academic studies and court rulings have confirmed that standardized tests contribute to the ongoing discrimination many marginalized communities still face. For example, admissions exams like the SAT and ACT claim to predict how well students will do in their first year of college, yet the test makers' own research shows their scores explain only 1/6 of the differences among students' first-year grades and an even smaller portion of four-year performance. There's also ample data indicating that these tests underpredict the achievement of entire groups. In 1989, a federal court barred the use of SAT scores as the sole factor to award millions of dollars in New York State scholarships, concluding that SAT scores capture a student's academic achievement no more than a student's yearbook photograph captures the full range of her experiences in high school. So essentially, he just said, you're $60. You just paid $60 for a test that was worth nothing. I don't understand why colleges still do this. Girl, you can't be doing that with scholarships. Similarly, a number of court cases have shown that employment exams, such as those used to select teachers, doctors, police officers, and members of hundreds of other occupations, don't actually predict work performance. So now we're going to talk about teaching in schools. Studies find that curriculum, quality, and teacher skill make more difference to educational outcomes than the initial test scores or racial backgrounds of students. So analysis of national data from the high school and beyond surveys and the National Educational Longitudinal surveys have shown that while there are dramatic differences among students of many racial and ethnic groups in subjects like math, science, and language classes, achievement test score differences by race or ethnicity don't really differ. Robert Drebin and his colleagues at the University of Chicago conducted studies documenting the relationship between educational opportunities, student performance, and minority students' access to those opportunities. In a study done with about 300 first graders, Dreeben found that Black and white students who had the same teaching had the same levels of reading skill. In that same study, he also found that the quality of instruction given to Black students was, on average, a lower quality than white students. In fact, the group that had the higher reading skill was in a school in a low-income Black neighborhood. These children learned less during the first grade than their white counterparts because their teacher wasn't able to provide the challenging instruction they deserve. In another example, Eleanor Armour Thomas and colleagues compared a group of exceptionally effective elementary schools with a group of low-achieving schools with similar demographic characteristics in New York City. So, for example, two schools that have a high number of Black folks in them. About 90% of the differences in student reading and mathematics scores at grades 3rd, 6th, and 8th was due to the differences in teacher qualifications. The schools with highly qualified teachers serving large numbers of minority and low-income students performed the same as much more advantaged schools. So this kind of goes to that Teach for America program. I didn't realize how kind of problematic it is to have students who just graduated and might not have the necessary tools in education, like being able to have, like, say you have a BS in history, but you also have BS in history and education. So now you would be a bit more certified to be able to teach students. And Teach for America, I believe that is not how that works. It actually contributes to a lot of schools not having adequate teachers to be able to teach students to their highest ability, particularly Black and brown students, because that's where Teach for America usually is. Another experiment randomly assigned 7th grade at-risk students to remedial, average, and honors mathematics classes. They found that the at-risk students who took the honors class outperformed all other students of similar backgrounds. Another study compared Black high school students randomly placed in public housing in the Chicago suburbs with city-placed students who had the same income and academic skill. Suburban students who attended largely white and better funded schools were more likely to take challenging courses, perform well academically, graduate on time, attend college, and find good jobs. So in the educational system now, the National Commission on Teaching in America's Future issued a guide that had a list of policies to ensure a caring, competent, and qualified teacher for every child, and to make sure that the goal supports outside of teaching, and to make sure that the school supports outside of teaching are aligned with that goal. 12 states are now working on the commission on this agenda, and others are set to join. There are a lot of bills in the United States right now that are being looked at, hopefully, to fix the federal Higher Education Act. These bills would make sure that highly qualified teachers are recruited and prepared for students in all schools. States can make sure that instead of schools being funded according to the amount paid in taxes in that district, which can contribute to the lack of resources in these schools, the amount of money distributed to each district would be equal, making sure that all school districts have equal access to the resources that they need. And states can enforce higher teaching standards on all school districts to reduce teacher shortages. And some of this work is being done in Connecticut, Kentucky, Minnesota, and North Carolina. School districts can also redistribute resources from administrative school districts and instead create programs to help support and hire better teachers, giving them more money to then create a better school curriculum. This is being done in New York City and San Diego, California. As a result, these students have higher levels of doing well in school, particularly students of color. So many organizations continue to promote inclusive policies, but they might not use the term affirmative action. Americans are behind the broad concept of equal opportunity and improving the position of racial minorities in society, but they are not in agreement with how it should be happening. So Pew Research in a 2019 survey found that 75% of Americans said that it was very or somewhat important for companies and organizations to promote racial and ethnic diversity in their workplace. But in that same Pew study, they found disagreement with the concept of using racial accounting as a means to accomplish racial equality. So they asked, when it comes to decisions about hiring and promotions, do you think companies and organizations should take a person's race and ethnicity into account in addition to their qualifications in order to increase diversity in the workplace, or should only take a person's qualifications into account even if it results in less diversity in the workplace? 74% 40% of people chose the second choice. General Social Survey in 2018 asked, some people say that because of past discrimination, blacks should be given preference in hiring and promotion. Others say that such a preference in hiring and promotion of blacks is wrong because it discriminates against whites. What about your opinion? Are you for or against preferential hiring and promotion of blacks? If favors A, do you favor preference in hiring and promotion strongly or not strongly? And if opposes B, do you oppose preference in hiring and promotion strongly or not strongly? The results show that 72% of US adults oppose giving preference to Black Americans in hiring and promotion. So I'm going to get into this question. It's a terrible question to ask. In all of my research classes that I've ever had, they say that your polling questions or the things you use in your study have to be able to be understood by anybody. And I think they have like either a second or third grade elite reading level, like it should be understood at that level. So this question is terrible. One, because they use blacks. Two, because it's kind of obviously trying to make the person think that promoting Black people is wrong in general. So I don't know why they asked the question this way. I don't know why anybody decided that this question was a good one to ask. For starters, I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's really, really long, so hopefully you were able to sit down, do something else, enjoy yourself while you were looking at it or listening. I know a lot of my friends say they listen to it while they're doing something. I think affirmative action is a really good thing to have because the United States and its systems, and I mean most systems all over the world, have a system that supports males or white people in general more than it might with people who do not fall within that category. So I am really happy that this program exists, but it also doesn't answer for other inequalities that can still exist. I remember in my undergrad we had to take placement tests, and I didn't realize how systematically wrong it was until I went into the classes that they put me in. They put me in remedial classes because I got really anxious when I was taking that test. I thought I was real dumb. But in those classes, I was in a predominantly white institution, and in those classes, most of the folks in there were Black and brown. Looking at the whole person is way better than just looking at certain academic things. And I definitely want to say, particularly for schools, it is not always on the students to be able to have to succeed. It also means that they have to have proper resources that support them to help them succeed. Students are not going to do well if the environment that they're in is just as bad as maybe their environment at home. You can't just blame the student for things being bad. You have to also look at the environment around you. You have to look at what is going on that is outside of just blaming a student, because it's not really always that the student is bad. Sometimes it's just that the environments that they're in from home to school are just as bad too. The idea of making sure that schools are places of learning that are inclusive and are trauma informed doesn't really exist, and that means that teachers aren't well equipped to teach students, and the administration that's put in place to kind of help keep the school system running isn't equipped to support the teachers and students. Having enough educational resources is incredibly important, especially when it comes to making sure that some of the best teachers are more financially supported, both in the classroom and in their personal living situations. So there's a lot of information, and I just said a lot of stuff, but thank you for watching. Hope you had a great time, and I'll see you next week. If not, this might be split into 2 parts, which I really hope I don't do. Bye!